So, what is mass assignment attack? So, in order to reduce the work for developers, many framework providers convenient mass assignment functionality. This lets developer inject an entire sets of user enter data from a form directly into the object or the database. Without it, developer would be forced to tediously add code specifically for each field of data, cluttering the code base with repeated form mapping code. The downside of this functionality is that it is often implemented without a whitelist that prevents user from assigning data to the protected fields. An attacker may exploit this vulnerability to gain access to sensitive data or to cause the data loss. So, an example of this, simple example of this is an attacker exploiting mass assignment vulnerabilities can update object properties that they should not have access to allow them to escalate privileges, tamper with data, and bypass security mechanisms. So, in this example, the attacker has changed the API call to update their account and escalate their role and privileges to an admin role and bypass the SSO single sign-on. If successful, the attacker can then perform action within the application as an administrator. So, prevent the Rails, which means the Rails framework is taken as a reference, offers two class methods in the active record class to control or limit the access to your attributes. Like attribute protected means blacklist principle and attribute accessible means whitelist principle. So, attribute protected. So, this method requires a list of attributes that cannot be accessed for mass assignment. To set up protected attributes, you must assign them individually, like as I shown here, attribute protected as admin and attribute protected large logging, then it sent to as admin. So, and another one is attribute accessible. So, another convenient way is to use whitelist principle is the attribute accessible method. This is exactly the opposite of the above attribute protected method, which is this like a method which allows a list of attributes that can be accessed. All other attributes will be protected, and this way it is easier to protect attributes while adding a new one during the development. Utilizing mass assignment may make the work of developer easier, but it will help as attackers exploit vulnerabilities. Hence, it is important for developer to use mass assignment carefully by considering all the security measures that helps the developers to keep the web app secure for all of the developer himself and also for all of the users that going to be used. So, prevention against mass assignment. You should try to disable the automatic mapping of properties whenever possible. All properties should be mapped manually and others should be ignored for the better case of yourself. You should not rely on block list to block the data that the user is not allowed to edit, but instead you should rely on the whitelist that enables user to edit specific objects. This will be more resource intensive though, as you have to have a really good overview of the logic and properties of the application. But knowing this brings a lot of security to the table is a strong argument for the added cost. Rely on the function of the framework when backlisting or whitelisting instead of writing your own. These functions have been tested many times over the years, so they are more likely to be safe than a custom built function. If you have a resources, then you should always investigate the request and responses that reaches the API and what properties they can have. Test, if you have time, then test the parameters if the user cannot edit or actually read only by sending them in a request and trying to edit them. So in conclusion, I will say that as you can see, you need to think very carefully about the function of each parameter and make sure you understand what it means and what all the options are with the specific property. Make sure you investigate all the properties and the object that has in the properties and also that have on the API, and the unused properties that do not get sent to the production where they might get abused. So that's all for the mass assignment.